Hey friends, and welcome back to the Midlife Edit. Today's episode is one that feels particularly on brand for this show because it's about women reclaiming their voices, creating something bold, and honestly just refusing to stay quiet. My guests today are Nicolette Blount and Sirena Grey, and they are two longtime friends who first connected back in school because they were the punk-loving rebels who decided to come together and start writing stories and creating this lifelong friendship. And they've recently reunited to create something that is so incredibly exciting, especially for me. It's called Riot Grrrl, the punk anti-musical. Nicolette is a Chickasaw musical theater writer, composer, lyricist, and producer whose work includes Savage, the Unconquerable Wanda Savage, which is a powerful musical inspired by the true events of her great-grandmother, who was a sharpshooter, a vaudeville performer, and a silent film actress who completely lived life on her own terms. Sirena is a writer, editor, and author who is stepping back into her creative life after raising 3 boys, something that so many of us listening will relate to, because it's about rediscovering the passions that sometimes get put on pause during the years that we spend raising families and figuring out who we are as mothers and beyond, right? And together they're creating Riot Grrrl, a new musical inspired by the feminist punk movement of the 1990s. And it was this movement that challenged the music industry, gave women a louder voice, and pushed back against the systems that tried to keep them quiet. In this conversation, we talked about rediscovering creativity in midlife, the reality of balancing motherhood and identity, feminism, music, and storytelling, the long road it takes to bring a musical to life, which was really surprising to me because I didn't realize all that went into this. It's really interesting, honestly. And why sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just simply deciding to start again. So, if you've ever felt like it might be too late to chase something creative, this episode, it's going to remind you that it's not. Here's my conversation with Nicolette and Sirena. Sirena, Nicolette, welcome to the Midlife Edit.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
We were talking a little off camera, and I said we have so much to talk about, so we're going to get right into it. Before we dive into the projects that you're working on and all of the amazing things that you've done, can you just tell me a little bit about yourselves and what you're doing in the world right now?
Go first.
Blount, Chickasaw. I'm speaking in my native Chickasaw tongue because I am Chickasaw Native American and our language is endangered. And what I said was, hello, my name is Nicolette Blount and I am Chickasaw. I am a musical theater writer. I compose, I write lyrics, I write book, I produce off-Broadway. I have not produced on Broadway yet. I'm a part of the Museum of Broadway. I perform on occasion. I consider myself a Riot Grrrl from back in the day. And kind of a punk. So with that tradition, I move forward and keep on doing things that are anti the system and rebelling in a lot of ways, even in my old age.
How about you, Sirena?
Let's see. I don't speak other languages fluently like she does, but I am a stay-at-home mom with 3 boys, and they're all in college now. So that's why I'm kind of finally getting time to get started doing the stuff I want to do. I have been trying to write a book for probably the better part of a decade, and starting it when they were small like that was probably not the best idea. I don't know, constant interruptions. Plus, I was a hockey mom, so hockey weekends. Sometimes when I did get a free moment, I was just too darn tired. So I'm finally getting to do all that stuff now, and that's pretty much what I do. I write, I do freelance writing, I do articles here and there, essays. I also do a lot of editing, proofreading, all that kind of stuff. And especially recently, with all my boys getting into college and having their, what do they call those things? Personal statements. I had to do a lot of reading and stuff for them as well, but I do it for everybody. So when somebody needs something done, they come to me for that kind of stuff. So that's what I do. Not as accomplished as she is, but I'm also just getting started.
Okay, I just started 9 years ago. It's all good.
Yeah.
And we're all accomplished in different ways. I mean,
yeah.
You not be accomplished as far as you want to be as an author or a writer, but man, you raised
as a parent, I feel like I am. All 3 of my boys are going to UC schools. Actually, one's graduated and applying to med school right now. So I feel like I did a good job with them. Huh?
You're very accomplished.
I think so.
So we're going to get into Riot Grrrl, the anti-musical, in a little bit, but that's what the both of you are working on. So tell me, how did you meet each other and how did the conversation start?
Oh my God. You're asking a perimenopausal or menopausal, who knows what the hell I am, woman to remember something. I was fearing this. I was like, what if she asked me things I can't remember? I remember when I was in school, we both went to a private Christian school for a little while and together. And she was a year ahead of me. And I'm really not sure how we met because we really didn't have classes together.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I think we just started hanging out because like she was the punk girl and I was into punk and we were both like rebels and there weren't many
like attracts like.
Yeah. We both would write. We would write these books and Sirena worked in the office. And so she had access to the copy machine. So, you know, back in the day, the Riot Grrrl type zines and things like that, we would, you know, copy things and put them on paper. And then that would be like our cover photo of like our books. And I remember in my book, like I always had like everyone dying in the end. And the odd thing about it is like a lot of things that I wrote about in my books came true, not like the murder part, but like I wrote a book about Hawaii. I ended up living in Hawaii. My kids were born there, like weird things like that, like manifesting or whatever. But we would write these books. We also had like a notebook because she was in another class ahead of me where we would write during class instead of course, paying attention. And then we would pass it between classes and read what the other person had written. And then someone else would write. It was like old school email. Before we had email.
It was like the early stages of one of those novels that two women write together.
Yes, yes. And in fact, I think
she wanted everyone to die and I wanted everyone to fall in love.
So we just, I don't know, we just became really good friends. And then she went away to another school and I went away to a boarding school that I was kicked out of to leave, whatever. So yeah, it's kind of like we were like us and Raul and maybe one other person at our school were like punk, us openly punk. Like there were a lot of people who listened to the alternative music and stuff. But, and this was back, you know, in the 80s, well, late 80s, late 80s. Let's not age ourselves. I graduated in 91. So that tells you a little
Graduated
bit.
in 90. Yeah.
So, and
well,
then we
also remember we had a dress code. They weren't like, it was hard to express yourself as a punk because there were only certain things we could have on t-shirts. And I remember Raul showing up at school with like a Dead Kennedys and God We Trust shirt with it, which had like a dollar bill cut in half and had Christ hanging on it. He was immediately sent home because that did not go over well in a Christian school, of course. And so, yeah. It was hard.
I don't remember though. I don't even remember like the exact moment we met. Do you?
No. I remember, I feel like I picked up mid journey with you, you know, and then it's just been.
And then we kind of like disconnected, went our own ways. And then we reconnected with social media.
Mm-hmm.
And then about, when did we start this journey? Like a year ago?
About a year and a half ago, you texted me and said, hey, you want to do this? And I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah, I was like, what are you doing? I said, let's do something. And because I know she's a good writer. And in fact, also, let me also say that she started the zine, The Underground, right? Back when we were in high school. And even when I went to boarding school, she was still sending me copies in the mail.
That's awesome.
Mind you, I cannot find a single issue of that anywhere. She thinks she might have one, but
you got to find that. You have to find that.
We should ask our friends and see if anyone happens to have one, like someone who's a pack rat.
Definitely.
And I want to see pictures from when you guys were younger because I can just picture it. I went to Catholic school until 6th grade and it was the same thing. You couldn't express yourself because you had to wear a uniform. We used to color our hair with Crayola markers and then the nuns would send us in the bathroom to wash it out because we weren't allowed to have that.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah. And same with the dress codes. Even in public school, I remember I wore a Kurt Cobain shirt after he died, like his obituary on it. And I was allowed to wear that. Times are completely different. But,
oh yeah.
And I remember we used to ditch school and we would ditch school together. And I remember one time Sirena took me to her old high school and my parents had put me through Christian private school my whole life. I don't know why. I never fit in. We went to Serena's old high school for the day. Do you remember this?
Uh-huh.
And I remember sitting there in one of the classes going, first of all, the teacher didn't care who we were or where we were from or didn't even notice that we weren't like normal students there. I remember there were metal detectors, which I was like, what is this? What is this?
which were new because when I was like actively going there, they weren't there because that wasn't a thing back then. That didn't
it had
happen
just
until
started.
Columbine. So
Yeah. So, and I remember also sitting in class and like none of the kids were paying attention and like they were goofing off and the teacher was gone like most of the class period. And I was like, wow, this is completely different than private school. Like everyone
oh
sits
yeah.
quiet and they like, me and Serena were the rebels and maybe a few other people, but like usually people were like listened and I don't know, it was completely different. It was crazy.
So all these years later, you've reconnected and
Oh yeah.
have passion again that you've had forever. So the thing I want to get into before we get into all the projects that you've done and all the fun stuff is motherhood is a job in itself, right? And you both know that. You both have children, you both have children, and you kind of give up a part of who you are in a good way most of the time to raise these children, right? You kind of forget that girl who skipped class back in the day, had to go and was a rebel because now you have little humans to take care of and make sure that they're fed and clothed and bathed and all that stuff. So you're crushing the mom life, and then your kids get older, and then you're like, okay, it's time to get back to me. So I want to start with you, Serena. When you decided I'm going to do this again, I reinvigorated. You know what I mean? I've got this new passion back in me again, and I want to start writing. How hard was it for you to do that? And did you have a discussion with anyone before you did it, or you're just like, screw it, I'm going to do it myself, and this is what I want to do, and I don't care what anybody says?
It was more of the latter. I mean, I decided I had toyed in school like wanting to be either a teacher or a nurse and went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on that. But then after I went to college, I was like, I like writing. I really liked writing. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do that. Because I used to do it in high school. I've always had a passion for it. I've always kept journals and diaries and things like that. So you know what? I'm like, I'm going to write a book. And I started to write the book. But like I said, it was a big mistake because unless you can like sit there and do a lot of research and have time to actually like plot and write and without getting interrupted, it's impossible, so I would try and do it and I would try and do a lot of research, and then it got to the point where it was like, I really hope my husband does not check my browser history because of the different things I was like Googling, like how to poison somebody and stuff, but actually it was more like, which flowers are poisonous, but
check that browser history.
Well, that was the night. Then I found a bunch of memes online that were like, if they check my browser history, all I have to say is I'm a writer, and it was supposed to just like completely, excuse my my searching. But no, but I started writing a book, but I honestly had no idea what I was doing. So I started following a bunch of writers, and I started reading because I'd also heard that writers read a lot, and I'd always liked to read, and I'd always read, but I just like kicked up my reading even more. So I got to the point where I was reading like 75 to 100 books a year because I just, and then I also fell in love with reading again. But as I read, there was a certain kind of books I started liking, and I started to like just take notes, like how they were writing it, how the stories came together. So I started doing it myself, but I'm a Virgo and I'm a perfectionist. So I have this like big mistake where instead of getting the first complete draft written, I wanted to like go back and edit it and fix it. And then I would just like get stuck in this where I couldn't get past like the first few scenes because I kept wanting to go back and change stuff. My husband's like, no, write that thing, write it all out. Then you go back and edit. And I was like, like it seems simple, and honestly, I do have critical thinking skills, but it was like, no, but still my brain didn't want to wrap around that because I wanted to go back and like, just make sure everything was perfect. And he's like, it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. That's what the edits and having people read it and that sort of stuff, when you get help with that, that's when it becomes perfect. Right now, just get the story out. So I was working on a book, and then finally I was like, you know what? I thought I was way too invested in that book and just overwhelmed with it. I'm like, I'm going to start from scratch. So I started a whole new thing, and that one's actually been a little more successful for me, but I did start to fall into that loop again, where I was going back and trying to like make it too perfect. And my husband had to remind me again, didn't we talk about this? You need to just get the story written and then go back and edit. And now working on this musical with her, I don't find myself doing that. And it's also kind of, I've been able to like bring that over on working on my book. You know, when I'm not working on the musical, I'm just getting the story out right now. And I'm just about done getting that first draft written. I've gone back, I've had to change a couple of things, but that was a lot easier going back. Like when I decided I wanted to change a plot point, or when I decided at one point, I revealed the secret too soon. I got to fix that. So, you know, and it was easier to just go back and fix a couple little things than to like, no, I don't like this story and start it all over again, you know, like I was doing before. But it's easier now, but I definitely had no idea what I was doing. No.
Do you feel like the older that you get, the more confidence that you have to be like, okay, done is better than perfect. Let's figure it out and then we'll go edit it. Do you think it's your age, or do you think, you know, it's just something in you that was just like, okay, I just got to get this shit out?
I think it's a little of both. I definitely think it's a little of both, because the nice thing with age is you start to like not care. And if the book isn't perfect, it's not that big of a deal. And, you know, like I go on Goodreads after I've read a book to see what other people thought about it, to see, you know, if I was just like a little over enthusiastic about it, or if I didn't like it and for some reason and everybody else did, then, you know, kind of like question my taste or whatever. But I noticed that it doesn't matter what people write. There's always going to be somebody that's going to complain about it. Someone's going to write a bad review. It's not even about, a lot of times the bad reviews aren't even about the story. It's about like, you know, oh, that guy was such a jerk, you know, and I couldn't read him because he was just so terrible to her and whatever. And I'm like,
that was
isn't that kind of real life? You know what I mean? Like, guys can be jerks, and that's the whole point of the story, for him to have like a redemption arc and get over that stuff, you know. And then so my husband was like, yeah, he's like, and that kind of like messed with my confidence a little bit, because I'm like, well, what if people don't like my stuff? And my husband's like, it doesn't matter if they like it or not, they're gonna read it, you know. And he's like, and it doesn't matter what they say on Goodreads about it, because they're gonna read it anyway. You know, their friends are gonna read it and everyone's gonna read it. It doesn't really matter. So, and I'm like, you know what, 20-year-old me wouldn't have heard that. 20-year-old me would have been like, yeah, I don't know about that. 50-something-year-old he's like, well, don't care. Okay, I can do this.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm a little bit younger. I'll be 43 this year, but I feel like this is the time where I'm just like, I don't care. Like, other people's opinions of me, they're not my business. So let's just move on.
Oh, I live by that motto. Whatever other people think about me is not my business, and I don't button to anybody else's business. I don't care. I mind my own business about everything. And I guess that's the nice thing that comes with getting older.
Yeah. Nicolette, I wanna go to you and ask this question. I did get to listen to a podcast that you were on when you were doing Savage. When you started Savage, I listened to a few things. I found it very interesting that you are the only one in your family that has this kind of musical writing, the creative side of the brain. And so can you talk about that and kind of how, you know, you stopped what you wanted to do, and yet you had kids and you had helped your husband get through med school? Like, I'm very curious about that as well.
So just side note, Sirena and I were both punks back in the day. All the girls at our school were like, can I cuss on here?
Absolutely.
They were bitches. They were stuck up bitches. I will not name names, but you know who you are. Okay. Anyways.
They're sitting there listening to this podcast going, damn, I should have been.
I know.
Well, one of the rules of writing is if you didn't want people to write badly about you, you should have behaved better.
Right. So anyways, like, I remember like saying one day that I had a boyfriend, and this girl's like, well, you have a boy, you like, and these same girls who were all talking about marrying doctors and whatever, to my knowledge, a lot of them haven't. Some of them are on a few, second, third marriage, which is fine. Not to put down people for that, because that's totally fine. But because of the way they treated us, and then we end up being married to 2 surgeons, just like weird coincidence. Like, both of us, I think, I mean, I can't speak for Sirena, but for me, like, none of us, like, I didn't want to marry a doctor. I wanted to just be happy.
Yeah, same.
And then both of us have kids. My oldest is pre-med. Her son is looking to go into medical school. Like, it's just funny how like, if you're just a real person, how that just like works out for the best in your life. So anyways, that's a side note. So yeah, no one in my family was like, well, my nana, my grandmother, not my great grandmother, my grandmother She sang in big bands back in the day. I never saw her, but she would sing to me and teach me all these old like drinking songs. And she would have me sing the melody. She would sing the harmonies. So to this day, I can harmonize to any song that I hear like instantly. I could hear a song for a few minutes and start harmonizing to it. So she was the only person that I knew that was in the arts in any way. I guess my great grandfather played banjo. My great grandmother Wanda Savage, who I'm writing Savage about, she performed on vaudeville and in silent films, but that was in the 20s. That's her right there. That was in the 20s. I never met her. She died in her 40s. She's a badass. And so I didn't know anybody. Yeah. My dad would sing at church. He had a great voice. He would sing around the house. My mom was tone deaf. Like my dad was very creative, like artsy. Like he would make a lot of like models and things from scratch. He made a dollhouse for me from scratch. Like he was creative, but both of my parents were teachers. When I said I wanted to go into the arts, my mom wasn't too happy about it. My dad was like, I'd been singing and acting since I was young and then writing. And my dad was like, I don't care if you're, whatever you do in life, you could be, the person who picks up the garbage, just do things to the best of your ability. And then, yeah, like you said, I met my husband in the short stint that I went to college. And it was like, okay, you're going to go through school and a lot of schooling, and I will, work to help support you, and then I can go to school. And that was like the deal. And so I taught preschool for 8 years. I was an assistant director, and I loved teaching and brought all my creativity into that. And then like 10 years into our marriage, we started to try and have kids. My firstborn, it took us like 7 years to have her. And then she came out with a really rare form of spina bifida. She's also my daughter who is in pre-med and getting straight A's and wants to be a doctor. She's a miracle. She's a walking miracle, because a lot of kids with spina bifida are in wheelchairs. She walks, she dances. She has some issues, but she's doing great. And my youngest daughter is going to school for musical theater in New York. And my oldest daughter, who we kind of adopted a few years ago, 4 years ago she's going into nursing school. So, but getting back to that. So when I had my firstborn, we had moved to Hawaii. I'm getting out of order here. So my husband had gotten into a residency program through the Army. He was the only person chosen for this residency in Hawaii. They chose one a year, and he was one of them. And so we went there. And then that's when I went back to school for voice and theater. And then I finally got pregnant. And so then that kind of put everything on the back burner, especially because my daughter had special needs. And so there was a lot of like, not really sure what's going to happen, not really sure if she's going to be able to walk, not really sure what's going to happen here. She has 1% of the spina bifida cases. She is 1% of the cases. She's so rare. So a lot of times the doctors didn't even know. They couldn't even answer like, well, we think this is going to happen, but we're not really sure. Like that was kind of like, even in utero, when they were diagnosing me, they were like, well, we think it looks like spina bifida, but her legs are moving and she has nothing wrong with her brain. She has no water on her brain. We think it might be a teratoma. And those are like tumors that grow so big that sometimes they'll kill the baby because they suck the life out of the baby. So going up until like when she was born, a planned C-section, I thought it was going to be this teratoma. And then the reason why, when I was recouping from the C-section, the doctor who walked in was a really good neurosurgeon who my husband had rotated with. And the minute I saw him, I knew she had spina bifida. And so there went like, going to school, finishing school, which I was more than happy to do. This is not anything that I regret. This isn't anything that I like wish, oh man, like, no, none of that. And I still did like a lot of art stuff in Hawaii. I started a nonprofit. We put on these festivals every year of fine arts, like dancing and music and all kinds of stuff. So I still did stuff. I remember watching an episode of Oprah. And I'll never forget this. Good old Oprah. And she was interviewing other moms. I can't remember who it was, but I remember her and whoever she was talking to saying that one of the biggest issues with women especially women who stay home with their kids, is they lose themselves in being a mom. And it's fine to be a mom. It's beautiful. It's the most wonderful thing you can ever do. But your kids go off to school and then you're like, well, who am I? What do I do? I have nothing to do. I remember, what's that?
100%.
So
you are speaking my language.
So I saw that episode and I was like, that is not going to be me. No way. I am not going to be that person. So when my kids were little, I went back to school for fashion design. This is all through the Academy of Arts University, which is in San Francisco. They had an online program. And to be honest, it's probably harder to do it online than it is in person, because you take pictures of every stitch and you can see every little flaw, whereas in person, your naked eye would not see that. Because I would upload a picture, I was like, oh, that looks great. And then I see it on the picture, I'm like, oh my gosh. So I did fashion design. I also started a little girl's clothing line on Etsy, a custom clothing line. These were just things I was doing. Yeah, called Little Lollipops.
That now.
Yeah, this was just so creative. And people would be like, how do you have time to do this? I said, I don't sleep. I mean, to this day, I don't sleep. I stay up late, and I think I have ADHD. I hyper focus on something.
Sleep.
You know, us Gen Xers get diagnosed with anything. So I'm pretty sure I have ADHD. And then once I got my kids raised and they were doing good. I was still in school for fashion design. This was back in 2016. All of our parents died of cancer, one right after another in their 60s. It sucked. It was hell. Both of our moms died of glioblastomas, which are supposed to be rare. Something about Southern California, if you ask me.
Don't curse me.
My dad got a rare cancer. None of them drank or smoked because they were Seventh Adventists. So none of them drank or smoked, and they all died of cancer early in their 60s, one right after another. And my husband's mom lived the longest. She died right before she turned 70. But going through all that was really hard. And when I went through that, the last song I wrote, because I grew up writing music, writing books, writing poetry, the nasty poems I wrote in high school. I have those for sure somewhere. Just they could be in a porn magazine or something. But anyway, so I crap, what was I saying? Last moment. What was I saying?
Last song you wrote?
I don't even know.
The last song I wrote was for my dad and his battle with cancer, and it was called Eagle's Wings, and it was played at his funeral when his casket went down. And then it was played at my mom's funeral when the casket went down. And after that, I couldn't write one song for 7 years. I was in such a funk. I was depressed. I was anxious. I was having anxiety attacks, panic attacks. It was bad. So for 7 years, I didn't write one thing until I started writing the musical Savage, about my great grandmother, Wanda Savage. And then that's when I stopped doing fashion, because I was like, oh, I'm finally doing what I love fashion, but it's not like my love, which is music and theater. And I was like, I'm finally back to what I originally always wanted to do. And I found a way to do it. And then I stopped going to fashion school, and and then kind of brings me up to where we are now. And I would say that, 2017, my kids were still in school and stuff, but they were junior high, high school. Let's see, that was is that 7 years ago? No, 9 years ago. They would have been in junior high, late elementary, something like that. So they're able to take care of themselves more or less. I still was carting them around and stuff, but late nights. So I hope that answers the question.
And we're going to get into Riot Grrrl, I promise. But something that I just find so interesting about Savage, the musical, is when I first heard it, I'm like, okay, what is this about? And then, I was actually listening to the Spotify playlist because I thought it was so cool. I can't sing. I wanted to be Jem when I grew up. That's the only thing.
Great musical, Jem.
I love that cartoon.
I'm sure my mom still has the video of me dancing around when movies, but I can't sing.
Don't worry, neither can I.
I love
just her.
I love reading and music and watching and musicals and everything. And my dad was the one who really got me into all of these things. I was like, oh, I've got to listen to this, because there's something about musical theater. The songs in musical theater, even if they're the saddest songs, they just get you, they just kind of lift you up. So I was listening to that, and then I researched it a little bit. Holy shit, she was a badass. Your great grandmother was a badass. And it kind of brought me into thinking about women in general and how we're not allowed to be badasses. I think we're getting there, but we are so looked down on for speaking out and talking about what we wanted to do and being that person. I mean, you're just a woman, you're a mom, but you don't have a voice. Our voices are strong. And somebody like your grandmother, great grandmother's voice was so strong. So I just wanted to say that if you haven't gotten a chance, listeners, to look up Savage the Musical, or just please go check it out. We're going to link everything in the show notes anyway, but so badass. And I think it's so cool. Are you going to write a movie?
Well, we can. I mean, I've talked about that with my co-writer. I'm actually writing add to the many things on my list. I'm writing a book. I was asked by an agent to write a creative nonfiction about her life, but I'm going to probably do more of a hybrid memoir relating her story to my story and the show itself and moving forward. But yeah, the saying is she had 5 husbands and she only shot 2 of them. So she also, she was whitewashed. She was sexually assaulted. She ended up in a brothel. Nobody really knows in my family how she went from silent films to ending up in a brothel. And I bet you anything she pissed someone off. She had a temper, and I bet you anything she pissed someone off. And so that's kind of like the story that we're going with in the show. She did shoot one of her husbands on stage. That is documented in newspapers. I have clippings of it. Yeah, she was a badass, and she continued to be a badass once she decided to reinvent herself and live on a ranch in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming. So
great. Speaking of badasses, we're going to get into it now. Riot Grrrl, the anti-musical. So many different things about this. I have so many different feelings. And when I saw it on Instagram because Tracy Bonham she followed it, or she had reposted it. And I just talked to her a couple weeks ago, and I was just like, wow, this is really cool. And so I started looking into it, and I got the Breaking the Girl, the first the
issue.
What do you call it?
Issue.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
I was just so intrigued by it. Let's talk about why we're doing it. What prompted you to get together and be like, yeah, this right now is what we're going to do. This is our next project.
Well, that's like the third wave of feminism, right? Are we in the fourth? So I reached out to Sirena and I said, hey, I think I have this idea for a Riot Grrrl anti-musical. It has to be anti because it's punk music. It can't be a musical. And I'm not really into, if you listen to my stuff, I'm into a lot of pop music for musical stuff. I don't really write typical musical theater music. I like combining genres. I'm not a typical musical theater writer. I don't sound like Sondheim, and I never will. Because that's just not my style. And so I was like, I think this would be a really good time for this. I think this would be a really good idea for this musical. I don't know. I just started talking to Sirena, and she's like, yeah, we should do this. And then we started coming up with ideas. We wanted to kind of give voice to not only the movement, to the women who were ignored in the movement, like the Afro-American women. We wanted to give voice to girls who back in the day would have been considered tomboys, but they might have been lesbian, they might have been non-binary. We didn't really have the language for that back in the day. I also have come across some amazing musical theater actors who slay all day, as my kids say. They sound like they could be in a rock band, which Lena Hall actually is in a rock band, but also has gotten a Tony. Just a badass woman. She's also in Snowpiercer, the TV show. And then there's Jade McLeod, who's non-binary, who was in Jagged Little Pill, the tour. When I saw them, I was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen an unknown person get standing ovations in the middle of a show for singing You Ought to Know, and no one knows who this person is. And I was like, I have to know this person. So now Jade and I are friends, and I was like, Jade needs to be on Broadway, and Jade needs a show. And I think that this could be a great show for Jade. Maybe Lena, maybe Taylor Iman Jones, who's an African-American badass musical theater, Rocky singer. And so, yeah, then I don't know. Sirena probably has more deep things to say about it.
I don't know about deep.
Rising Gemini moon, but she's a Virgo, so she can probably get more into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, but I'm the introvert of the crowd here, so I don't know. I was interested in the project when she asked because I've always been an advocate for women, and I've always been into women's politically, socially, whatever. I'm into women's movements and things, and that's one thing that anybody that knows me well knows. I support Planned Parenthood. I don't shop at Hobby Lobby because they refuse to give birth control to their employees, which is, something very important. And I'm not going to get into like the nitty gritty politics about that stuff, but anything that affects women, I've always tried to, pay attention to it and be supportive of it for women because, I think some of it stems from the fact that feminism is such a loaded word these days. And when people hear the word feminism, immediately you want to think man hater or, a bunch of like lesbian women or who knows? I don't even know what these people think because I'm not wired to think that way. But I would like to change people's opinions of what feminism is, because in my opinion, feminism is whatever the hell a woman wants to be, that's what she's going to be. Whatever she wants to do, that's what she's going to do. You want to stay home and raise your kids? Fine. That doesn't make you one of these, I learned a new term the other day, trad wives, because you choose to do that, And I think that when women are affected by things, even if we're not all affected by things, we all are. If that made any sense. If one of us is hurting, we're all hurting, in other words. If one of us is suffering, we're all suffering. But I'm also kind of weird about it too, because while I'm very much on feminist movements and support and things like that, I try and be fair about it too. So like, I'm not completely like 100% just all in with the all me movements and things like that, or the, what is it?
Me too.
Yes, that one. I agree with it. I love it that women come forward now, because growing up, in the 80s and the 90s, yeah, I had my fair share of creeps, and I come from people that told me, shut up and don't talk about it. We just keep that stuff to ourselves and we just try and avoid situations like that. And my whole life, I thought that was total bullshit. But, I did because I thought that was what ladies did. And I love the fact that women get out and talk about this stuff now and call people out on it. I am 100% for that. But I also think that it kind of goes to excess. And as a mother and an aunt and a sister-in-law of somebody who've all been accused of sexually assaulting somebody when it did not happen, I really think that women need to stop and think about this stuff, because when you pull shit like that, you're actually setting us back and undoing all the hard work that we have worked so hard to do. And I think as it is, we're already going to have our work cut out for us for the rest of our lives. I don't see women ever 100% being on par with males.
Really sad.
We are in some ways, but we're not in a lot of ways. And I think anything that we do to set us back is just shameful, because we have to work 1.5 times, twice as hard as men do to get anything in this life. And yeah, I think we need to be very mindful and careful about that. So, I hope I don't get a bunch of like hate mail about this now, because I'm not against the movement. I'm just saying we should be more careful about, the things we say and the people we accuse, because not every man out there is a complete ass. Not every man out there cheats. Not every man out there is an asshole. There are a bunch of great men out there, and the ones that support us, even better as far as I'm concerned. But
well, there's some bad women out there, as there are bad men.
That's the other thing too. And that's where I was going to go with that too. See, I got the perimenopause brain going on as well. My husband works in a hospital, and he tells me all the time that it's actually women there that are worse. They'll like talk about the new hot doctor that started working there, and saying horrible things like they want to climb him like a tree and stuff like that, and he's like, people don't think anything about it when women say stuff like that, but it's just it really is just as bad, and objectifying men is just as bad. And I'm guilty of it. We all are. I'm really trying to be more mindful of that stuff, because it's very true. And I think when I start to get on one of my pedestals here talking about, how men can be such, dickheads, my husband will like rein it in and be like, women are like that too. And I'm like, no, you're right.
That's true. And within my industry, women are, I think I sent you some stats and I can't quote them off the top of my head, but women are very underrepresented in Broadway and off-Broadway. As are natives. Natives are 0% represented year after year. Sometimes we'll get 1%, but like according to the AAPAC visibility report, natives like every year 0 to 1% on all fronts: creative, writers, producers, actors, 0%. And women are also very underrepresented. It's not something that I talk about as much because I'm usually advocating for Native stuff, but women are very underrepresented. And I think one of the things that was told to me recently was, there's already a punk musical, like a Riot Grrrl musical out there. And I was like, there is? Of course, and not to put down, because these writers are really talented, not to put them down, but again, men writing women's stories. And every time I hear it, I get so mad inside when a guy goes, oh yeah, I'm writing the story about this woman, and I'm like, dude, write what you know. That's not what you know. Unless it's about your mom or your sister, like, please stop telling our stories. The Prom, the musical that was on Broadway, was a movie written about two lesbian girls. The guys who wrote that were going to write about, this is what I've heard through the grapevine. The guys who wrote that were initially going to write it about two gay guys. And then they went, oh, the majority of ticket buyers in Broadway are women. And there's all these women write things going around. Me too. Let's make it two lesbians. But men wrote the story. Men continue to write our stories, our music. We continue to buy the tickets, as women in their 40s being the majority of the ticket buyers. Like, women are, and not only, and we're talking about like women everywhere, like women producers, women actresses, women in the pit who are doing the musicians. That's why Maestra started. That's a group for women who are musicians and songwriters. I'm a member of it. I'm trying to advocate for women in theater. So there are these inconsistencies and areas where women are still underrepresented in our industry, and very in a big margin underrepresented. So it is a real thing. Some things just haven't changed. Like, you keep thinking that they're going to change, and they haven't. And so when I found out that there's this musical that was written about Riot Grrrls, but it's nothing like our story. But also, they used music that was in the public domain. Or not public domain. They used punk pop music out in the world from big artists. So it's not original music like ours will be. And also, some of the songs they have in aren't even punk songs. I'm like, how are you calling this a punk musical? That's not a punk song. Katy Perry is not punk. I'm sorry. So I'm just like, what is going on here? So when I found out that there is this other musical that exists, it never went to like Broadway. It might have done like an off-Broadway stint, but I'm like, okay, fine, great. I'm sure it was a great show. I know the writer is very talented, and not to put down on that person at all. But our show is going to be authentically female. We already have a director who wants to direct it, an off-Broadway director. The plan is to have females within, I'm not opposed to men either, of course. We've got to have men in there too. But like, I would like the majority of the creative team to be female.
So what's the story? Like, what are we gonna, when we go see this, what should we look for?
So,
well, it's about it's about three girls. We're toying with the dual protagonist thing, which is kind of a tricky situation, but the third girl is going to be almost as important as the other protagonist. But essentially, it's the story of three different girls that have three different ideas of what they want to do. One wants to be a writer, one wants to be a musician, and the other one is just, a good straight A student who wants to be a part of the movement. And I don't think she really knows how to become a part of it, but she definitely knows it's something important and wants to be a part of it, whatever it is.
And the girl who wants to go into the rock band, she's our African-American character. And so we're going to see a lot of the backlash that she gets, as a lot of African-American girls in that movement did, and didn't feel like there was anybody speaking up for them or asking them anything, or even all these meetings. Even in a lot of the biographies you read from a lot of the Riot Grrrls, like Kathleen Hanna mentioned it, and like looking back, she's like, yeah, this is kind of messed up. Their voices weren't heard. And
it wasn't intentional. It just no. They just kind of fell through the cracks.
Right. And then one of the characters, the one who wants to be a writer, we're thinking will probably be a non-binary character who struggles with their identity, but they don't really know what to call it or what to say, or they, dress like a boy, as their dad says, and things like that. Why don't you have a boyfriend? And then the one who is the perfectionist so the African-American character is Harlow. The character who is potentially non-binary is Ryan. And then Ryan's sister, London, is the perfectionist, the good girl, and she gets assaulted.
Oh, you just blew the plot.
Oh, no, that's not the plot. It's
just kidding. I'm totally
kidding.
That
is something that happens. No, we won't say the rest of it.
But no.
Yeah.
But is it going to be
have
like
to see what happens?
A punk concert, a traditional musical, or something just like completely different that nobody's seen before?
I mean, right now we're early development. So like we do have a book. We will have music. So it's being written probably from a writer's point of view as a traditional musical, but how that will be staged, how we're going to make that different will be completely up to our creative team. And once we get everyone in the room, there was a show that a producer friend of mine recently produced called Bo the Musical. It was in an old church that's now been converted into a theater. And when you walked in, it was like you were in a Nashville bar. And the whole show was kind of immersive in a sense that like you're sitting at these little cafe tables and chairs. There's like 2 different stages. It was very like you felt like you were in a Nashville bar watching a concert, but also listening to the story of this person. I think right now we're writing it as a traditional musical in the sense of like there's a book and music, but how that's going to play out on stage once we have a creative team and we start having meetings, I think that will be, I mean, we're open for a lot of different ways of doing this. So yeah, that's, you know, things morph and change, and it's a constant, you're constantly rewriting, you know, like on Savage, I think we're on.
Gotta get that first draft out.
Yeah, we're almost done with the first draft. Yeah. But so, like put a lot of ourselves into the show, like the song Monster that I've shared some of the lyrics on our Instagram, that comes from me being sexually assaulted. So like it's really raw and it's really honest. And, you know, I feel like we are putting a lot of ourselves and our own experiences into this. Like Sirena mentioning, you know, somebody in her family has been accused of things that they didn't do. That's also, you know, part of this. So we're trying to incorporate some of our real life experiences into this. And hopefully women feeling empowered after they see it.
When do you expect everything to be, no pressure, when you expect everything to be finished, and like, how does that look? Where does it go? Like, kind of tell us a little behind the scenes of everything's done. Your creative team's done. We have the cast, we have the music, everything. Then what happens? Where do we go see it? Is there...
Well, just so you know, it takes 10 years on average for a show to get to Broadway or off Broadway to some big stage, right? And we're at like, what, a year and a half?
Yeah. But we're trying to like work faster because of, you know, the political climate and the way the world's going these days. And it just seems to be like we were talking about the 4th wave of feminism. So the sooner we can get it out, the better. And the fact that like punk rock's all about DIY and doing things.
All that stuff is back. The record players, the Walkmans. My kids are like, I want a Walkman. I'm like, you want a what? What? We don't listen to
my son was like, I want
cassette
tapes. I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah. So the thing about the show is, in terms of moving forward, we have applied. So making a musical is a hustle. The whole thing, you could just call it, we should just call it, we're hustlers, not musical theater writers. We're just hustlers because you're constantly trying to find money. That's a huge thing. It is very expensive for me to just put on a reading of any of my shows, which means you invite industry people in, producers and stuff. You stand behind music stands, you have Broadway actors, they sing the songs, they read the script, it's acting, but no movement, no costumes, very basic. An industry reading will cost you about $35,000. So this is the problem, is how expensive things are. So we have to find investors, we have to find
producers,
we have to find grants, we have to find programs. Like we just recently applied to musical factory theater. Anyways, MFT, I think it's Musical Factory Theater. They have a lot of programs for like new shows. And if we can get into something like that, then yeah, we could be like, oh, come to this developmental production of Riot Grrrl and come see the show. And that's going to take some time. Arranging the music will take some time. You know, there's so many things in the pot. So it'll be a little bit. So you can follow us on Instagram and find out where we're going and you know, be a part of getting the girls to the front. But it will take a little while.
I think that's why we're doing it the way we're doing it too, because we want people to see how long it takes and what goes into it. So that's why we've invited people to come along on the journey with us
and develop a community.
I think that's great because somebody who has never done it myself, I would have never
Mhm.
guessed that it took that long. So
Yeah.
watching it and watching how hard you work to get just maybe a little meeting or this or that is so inspiring, honestly, because you don't give up. You just keep going. And somebody says no, you're like, oh, screw you. I'm going to go get a yes then. You know, and that's so awesome to see, though. And I'm really, really excited to see the journey and how big you take it. Because just from talking to you for the few minutes that I got to, you're both badasses, man. You're powerful.
Thank you.
So a few more questions, and then I'll let you get back to making things happen.
Yeah, I'm going to be writing some music after this, actually. Yeah.
Awesome.
I've got to go make breakfast.
This is like my
got people
tiny
waiting
little
for
studio
food.
right there.
Wow. So Nicolette, I'm going to ask you first. What is the first show that you saw that you thought, okay, I want to be involved in musical theater at some point in my life?
Two of them. One, the very first show I ever saw, I grew up in Riverside, California. Shout out to Riverside.
Yeah.
I grew up in Riverside, California. I now live in the East Coast, which is far from home. But my mom was a professor at Riverside Community College, and she knew I was musical. My mom, like I told you, nothing, like not artsy at all. And she thought, oh, there's this musical. I'm going to see if my daughter wants to go to this. And I don't remember how old I was. I remember being young. And she took me to see a college show of West Side Story. And I remember sitting there, which is still to this day, people are going to kill me. I'm not a huge Sondheim lover. Like in musical theater, that's like, oh, grab your pearls. What? But I'm not a huge Sondheim lover. Although I do have a book from his library that was gifted to me from the Dramatists Guild Foundation, which is super cool. But I do know that he's like this great person, but it's just not my favorite musical. But he did write part of West Side Story. And that's my favorite musical of his ever. I loved how dramatic it was. I loved the music. I remember sitting there and feeling this like pull, like I wanted to be on stage, like I wanted to be up there. I wanted to be part of this storytelling. And then the second show that I saw that made a big impact on me was, Rent was huge, because Rent was like, oh my gosh, there's pop music in theater? What? Songs I can listen to on the radio and like blast in my car. But the first Broadway show I ever saw was Miss Saigon. And the recent one that they did, I was really disappointed in. I think they made it more vulgar, and they also took out one of the really good songs and put a different song in that wasn't as good. But I saw the original with Lea Salonga, and that was back when New York was really sketchy. And I was like 19, 20, somewhere around there. And that another dramatic musical. So I think that I've really been influenced by dramatic storytelling. And I'm not somebody who's going to write. I mean, we will write funny things. Like in this show, there's funny things, but, and I would say Serena's bringing a lot of that, because in general, I think I'm more of a dramatic writer. I mean, like I said, everyone died in my books, and she's writing love stories. So Serena will bring in.
I gotta have that witty band.
And I am a funny person. I'm a really funny person. I don't know why. I don't know. It's just not where I go. So those were the shows that impacted me.
Serena, what about the books? So you said you were reading like 75 books a year. So
Easy.
give me like top 3 that made you want to write again. Not necessarily that you just love, but that you were like, I can do this. Let's go.
Oh man. It's that's the thing, because I read so many books, I have a hard time keeping track of all the stories that I've read. One of my all-time favorite books, believe it or not, is Valley of the Dolls, which was written in 1960s, and it's kind of a romance, but it's also, how do you describe it? It's about the industry, and but it was considered a very racy, charged book at the time, and it's actually like I said, it's one of my very favorite books. But I wanted to write books like that. But one of the other books that really got me started, because I'm trying to write like gothic romance and new adult romance, which new adult romance, if you don't know, is it's like a subgenre of the romance. It's under the romance umbrella, and it's different than young adult in the sense that like young adult books are more catered to like high school and sometimes tweens and teenagers and maybe really young adults, whereas like new adults can span anywhere from like high school to like mid I guess, when you're kind of new in your adulthood. And they tend to be a little more graphic sexually and a little more explicit in the language and things like that. So one book that I read that was okay, I wouldn't call it a favorite, but was A Beautiful Disaster by Jamie McGuire. That seemed to be like one of the show headers is a new adult book. So when people talk about new adult books, that's one of like the first books that comes to mind because that was one of the first ones out there. And after I read that, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do, this kind of thing. So I started reading a lot more new adult books, and then I started getting pulled into the dark stuff, like dark romance and things. And I was like, okay, I like this. I like these characters, where the guy is just such like an alpha jerk or just a bully. Sometimes, bully romances are a thing. And I love that, the love-hate romance, that goes on, and the, what do they call it? The catch and pull and stuff that go on in these stories, because it builds a lot of angst and it just kind of keeps me on the page and wanting to know what's going to happen next. And then, of course, I got to see the guy be taken down by, some girl. And the girls is what I love about these books is the girls are usually women that are strong and independent and sometimes have places of power, and they're always able to bring these men to their knees. And I don't know, it's cheesy, but I totally love it. And then that has kind of developed into my new, I'm in my, what they call the romantasy era right now. So I've just read the ACOTAR series and the Quicksilver books and the Fourth Wing books. And those are good in the sense that these women are even more powerful and more independent than the ones that are in regular romance stories. And they also integrate, I was telling Nicolette about this the other day, they're starting to integrate things that you haven't seen brought into books before, like the protagonist, the FMC in Fourth Wing, she's got a medical condition. And so those are different things that authors don't think to just bring into a story to give a character, some more depth. And I like the fact that not only is she an independent girl and a strong girl, but she's also having to navigate that around having something that holds her back, and she's able to not just overcome whatever the plot is, but she also can do it while she's disabled in some way or held back in some way. So that also just adds a little more depth to the stories. And I find that a lot of the romantasy books are like that. So I think that's what makes them so attractive, and they're really hot right now. So
relatable. I think relatability is a big thing now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We actually have thought about bringing in having one of the characters, especially since I have a disabled daughter, bringing in a character who is disabled in our show.
Yeah, I think it's very, very powerful. I mean, if you just look at history and even just Barbie dolls, how there was never anybody, she was a skinny white woman, and now it's okay, now there's a whole bunch of different Barbie dolls in different sizes and different races, and I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
So I'm a big music person, and I'm gonna ask every guest this. So I'm gonna ask the both of you, what is your song? That song that no matter what you're feeling, you put it on and you're like, that's my shit. I'm good now. Here we go.
My favorite song to this day that I will play, it ends up in my Spotify top 5, usually 1 or 2. The first or second spot is Pixies' Gouge Away. But this past summer, my husband and I were on the Oasis train, and we went over to Europe and saw them in Edinburgh. And then we saw them here in Pasadena as well. So I have an Oasis song that's kind of been on, that's kind of been competing with Gouge Away, and that's Little by Little. But yeah, which is funny because they're not punk songs, really. I mean, Pixies are kind of punk influenced, but Oasis not so much. They're Britpop. And yeah, my top songs are not punk songs, but punk is what I primarily listen to.
How about you, Nicolette?
You asked someone who loves so much different music, and I'm going to say something, and then I'm going to get off on here, and I'm going to be like, shit, why did I say that? Wrong song. I have different songs for different seasons. I've been listening to, are they called the Lamborghini Girls? And there's a song called Cuntology. They're like a new Riot Grrrl band from the UK. I kind of really love that song. But in general, I would say like I said, I have seasons. So I really love No Doubt. I really love Just a Girl and Spiderwebs. Like, I listen to No Doubt a lot. I listen to Bikini Kill, Rebel Girl. I've been listening to a lot lately just because, I don't know, it kind of like, it pushes me. I don't know what about it pushes me, but it does. I love that song by Gwen Stefani, What You Waiting For, because she's like, what you waiting for? What you waiting for? Like, cause I'm like, you know, it's very like pushing me to like go forward and to do more and to create more. I'm a huge Duran Duran lover from back in the day.
Oh yeah.
So love the,
Fab
love
Five.
the, I love The Cure. Geez, I don't know any of those. So many.
This was a bit of a trick question because, you know, when you're a music fan, you tend to like a little bit of everything. And the only music I don't really care for is country. But I will say that I like Johnny Cash and what's her name? Patsy Cline, you know. So I got a couple country bands there. But I get made fun of all the time because people pull up my playlist and we will go from having like, we'll have Duran Duran, we'll have New Order, we'll have Joy Division, we'll have Dead Kennedys, then we'll have Elton John. There might be a John Denver thrown in there somewhere. And someone is just like, were you high when you made this playlist? I'm like, no, man, I just like everything.
Same. Yeah. And I really love Bruno Mars. I love Bruno Mars. I think I was devastated when Prince died. I feel like that was one legend that I would have loved to see in concert and I never did. And I feel like he's this generation's Prince. He can dance, he can sing, he can play every instrument. Like he's so talented. And I love his like old style music, like, you know, kind of has like this retro vibe to it. I love that.
And David Bowie, I would have to say is my all-time favorite artist. You know, I like all his songs, so that's why I didn't name one of his songs as my favorite, because that's like asking me to pick my favorite child. But
yeah,
super unfair question, and I'm sorry because I'm the same way. You look at my Spotify, like, what is wrong with this girl? I'm like, no, I love it all. I just love music.
Yeah.
So we're gonna wrap it up, but I want everybody to know where to find you. I'm gonna link everything in the show notes, but you know, we need to talk about all of the things that you're doing. So I'm going to make sure that your Instagrams are on there, Savage the Musical's on there, Riot Grrrl, everything that you are going to do is going to be linked in the show notes. But a quick plug, where can we find you?
We are on Instagram on Riot Grrrl Musical, spelt with 3 R's as it should be and no I. And we're going to start a TikTok soon. That's our next venture. We are on the website. What is that, Sirena?
RiotGrrrl.com? No. Yeah, Riot Grrrl, www.riotgrrrlmusic.com. That's our
musical
website.
Isn't it musical? Riot Grrrl Musical?
Yeah, Riot Grrrl Musical.
Yeah. .com.
Yeah, we left out the anti-musical, you know, for space.
And through that, you can find Breaking the Girl zine.
Yeah.
And we need more people to submit for the next issues. We need art, poems, writing, all kinds of stuff. And so all the information for that is on the website. So we would love to hear your voices and bring the girls to the front. I also have a website, NicoletteBlount.com, and TakeMyShotProductions.com is my production website. And Savage the Musical, that's on Instagram and on TikTok and on SavageMusical.com. Yeah, all the things. We'd love to hear from you guys. We want this. We started the zine to make a community because our Instagram, I mean, I know it's still like under 1,000, but it has grown so quickly, like almost overnight. And we were talking about like, you know, we really should have a community of women again, like we did back in the day with the zines and stuff. Why can't we bring this forward and have an online zine and be more of a modern zine? And we really want to develop this community of like-minded women, even despite your politics, because what unites us all is our issues as women. And that should be, you know, the thing that it unites us all. And we might have different opinions on abortions and whatever it is, but we're still women and we're still all underrepresented. And if they can keep us fighting with one another, then they win. And we can't do that. We can't do that anymore. And even within my industry, I see this, like, you know, the cattiness and the like, why are we doing this to each other? So we want to do this zine. We hope that people will join in and submit and be part of this. We don't get any money from this. We're paying for it. And we just want it to be a space for women to talk and to be creative and start this community that I think is missing.
Yeah, because I read something this week that a patriarchy the difference between a patriarchy and a matriarchy is patriarchy, somebody wants to be in power and they're always fighting to keep somebody in power and fighting with each other to take that power. Whereas a matriarchy is based in community. And so I think that we're trying to establish a community, and even if it takes, the 10 years or whatever to write this thing, God, I hope not. But in the meantime, we hope to develop a community of women, and just some sort of side movement where it's just women championing women. And no matter what we believe, who we vote for, like she said, our feelings on social issues, we are all in this together. And if one of us is hurting, we're all hurting. It's the only way we're going to get out of this is to stick together, pull together, and do this together. So,
and something that's missing in this generation, speaking to like Gen Z and Gen Alpha, something that's missing is you guys are canceling everybody. And we're guilty of it too. Gen X has started on that bandwagon too. Millennials, all of us are guilty of it. But what that does is that creates, we're canceling each other. Yes. And especially when we're a group of minority group, like women, it's okay that someone believes in pro-abortion and someone believes in anti-abortion. It's okay. We're still women. That's their opinion. That doesn't mean I'm going to hate that person. That doesn't mean I need to cancel that person. It's okay. We can believe different things. That's what I miss about the 80s. I feel like we all believed different things and we could still be friends. There was no like hating each other. It was like trying to understand where they come from. You may not agree, but you might want to have conversations with people instead of just outing them and like canceling them. Sit down, call them up and say, hey, I want to know why you did that. I want to know why you think this. That is missing in our society. And hopefully we can help a tiny bit. I mean, I know we're a tiny speck in the universe, but like our zine can hopefully maybe help with something like that. It's okay to have different opinions and we don't need to hate each other. We don't need to cancel each other. Honestly, that's colonization. That's what happened with colonization. The natives were different than the colonizers. And so different meant bad. And we're doing it all over again, but with politics.
You're right. It's time to lift each other up instead of putting each other down. Well, anybody that listens to this podcast, you got to get your ass in there. At least read it. If you don't want to put anything out there yourself, let's go. It's time. It's time for us to be the stars that shine in the sky. So
I agree.
Thank you both for taking the time on a Saturday to chat with me. And I'm so excited to see not just this, but all of your projects moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Soon.
Yeah.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Midlife Edit. If something in this episode stayed with you, I hope you sit with it, not rush past it. Because this season is about listening to yourself and to what's quietly asking for more. If you want to stay connected between episodes, you can join the Backstage Pass. That's where I share behind-the-scenes notes, playlists, and things that don't always make it onto the podcast. You'll find the link in the show notes. And if this episode resonated with you, it would mean so much if you'd subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's the easiest way to support the show and help more women find it. So until next time, turn the volume up, and let's make it a damn good chapter.